3406.
Hello again. I'm Sierra Yankee 1 Echo Bravo Echo from Greece, and this is another video for a radio that just arrived. I'm sure that most of you know it. It's the big brother of the TID radio TDH3, the H8. Okay, let's have a look on this radio. We're gonna do the unboxing first, and we'll see how it operates later. Okay, let me hold this. Okay. As always, the user manual. I've said it to other videos too. Don't throw this away. It can explain some of the things that you can't understand and you can't find in your radio, some of the menus. Although most of those radios have a pretty similar structure in their menu, sometimes we need a reference, and this always helps. A rubber ducky antenna. Okay, pretty standard. We have a charging base here, and from what I saw, it connects to the USB-C and charges the radio at 500 milliamps. We have a charger and a USB-C cable, of course, that connects to the base, to the charging base, and the radio itself, which has a USB-C charging port directly on the battery. So the charging base isn't actually needed, but I guess for some people and me sometimes, it's nice to have the radio standing on your desk like this in the base and charging. Otherwise you have to leave it down and connect the cable here. Okay, let me take this out of the way. I have put a BNC adapter here, as I always do in my radios. First impressions. This radio is, of course, a lot bigger than the H3. I mean, I have the H3 here. You can see why I said this is the big brother of the H3, and it's totally another category of radio. This one is lighter, smaller to the hand, more portable, I would say. You can drop it in a pocket. This one is like a grown-up radio, of course, heavier. I think the build quality is a bit better in the H8. The plastics seem kind of heavier, if you get what I'm saying. And that's a good thing, I guess. And another thing that I noticed when the radio came and I started assembling it, putting on the belt clip and the battery, is that the battery has a latch here. I haven't seen this in any other of the radios I commonly show in my channel. This is the first one. I find it very nice, a very nice feature. I mean, okay, it's not a big deal, it's not the software of the radio, but I just found that the design of this radio was cared upon, if I can say it like this. I mean, you can see here is the latch, it's kind of hard to get off, and this releases the battery right here, and you can secure it back by pressing it. So I guess this can handle some drops and not have the battery fly away. Not a thing that we want to test though, but it's good to have it here. And let's release the battery. Okay. Right, let's see. Let me zoom here. 2500 milliamps. It's nice. And it's secured back. So first impressions, better build quality, a lot sturdier than the H3. It really feels like the big brother, as I said before. Here we have the Kenwood plug, of course, for programming, and headphones if needed. 2 programmable buttons down here under the PTT and 1 up here. We're going to see those functions later. And let's power it up. Okay. Now, the initial screen, the first screen, looks a lot like the H3 for those of you that have it. And the menu system is not that far different. We can have a quick look here. Interesting option, mic gain, power on message, brief LED. This is for when the screen goes out and the radio slowly flashes to show us that it's working. This one up here. This is the latest version of the firmware that is on the TID Radio site. You can easily download and update it. Various TTMF stuff. Here we have 2 menus about searching for frequencies, the CTCSS and the DCS codes. You can go into those menus when you have a set frequency and you're receiving, and you can search for the CTCSS and the DCS codes. Alarm mode, of course. Here we have 2 options. I'm just saying this because I saw a question somewhere. There is an option on this radio to transmit the alarm to the frequency that is set. So right now we have it on site. It's not going to transmit anything, but if I put this in TX alarm, when I press the alarm button, whichever it is, it will start transmitting this sound to the set frequency. Memory channels, offset, auto lock, busy lockout. What we have displayed here, the name of the frequency in the channel mode, scan mode. This is the selection of the transmit band, if it's going to be the BIS1 or a SET1 up or down. Timeout timer, the beep, dual wait, it's the dual watch, dual channel standby. Backlight, of course, bandwidth, Vox level, power save. Now this is another thing that I saw changed from the H3, and also another thing that I haven't seen in another Chinese radio. It has a power save option. Most of them go up to 1 to 4, but this one has an option for an extra power save setting, which is 1 to 8, even more. Of course, you have to test this if in your area you receive repeaters or talk to someone in simplex mode and you miss the first part of their sentence, then you have to lower this thing down. Transmit power. Here we have 3 settings, we're going to test them later. Low, mid and high. This is a 10 watt radio, that's how it's advertised. We're going to see later what it gives in the power meter. Step and squelch. So pretty standard and not a lot of strange menu options here. This is another thing I wanted to say about the H8. This is a VHF UHF radio. The set frequencies in this radio are 136 MHz to 174 for VHF and 400 to 520 MHz for UHF. It doesn't have airband. That's one of the biggest differences from the H3. So if you want to receive lower VHF frequencies, 120, 118 and stuff like that, this radio is not for you. It doesn't have airband. It's strictly VHF UHF radio, 2 meters 70 centimeter, as we are used to know those frequencies. Okay, before I continue the power test of this radio and the programming in my laptop, as some of you may know, this radio is sold by TID Radio in 3 versions: unlocked, GMRS and ham. Actually, it's sold as GMRS and ham, and there is an option to unlock this radio to all frequencies that are supported. And let's see how you can change this from the radio itself. The buttons that we need to do this are those three here, star, 0 and the dash button. And in order to select which version you want to use, you have to keep pressed the PTT button and then one of those three buttons here. The first one, the dash button, activates the unlocked version. So if I keep pressed the PTT button and the dash and power on the radio, you can see that it boots and asks me if I want to activate the unlocked system. So if I select yes here or no here, it will boot the radio with the unlocked option. Now, if I select the 0, again I have to keep pressed the PTT and the 0 and power on the radio. This activates the GMRS system. So again, in order to proceed, you press the menu for yes and the radio proceeds with the GMRS version. Finally, the star button, I keep press the star and the PTT and power on the radio. We have the ham version. We can proceed by pressing yes. The menu is for yes and the exit is for no, and it will activate and boot the ham version. As I said before, I have activated the unlocked version in my radio for testing and presenting it in this video. Now we're going to see the power output with the power meter and then proceed to the programming through the laptop. I forgot to mention is that when I assembled this radio, I found interesting that behind the belt clip here there is a metal plate, and also down here you can see that two metal smaller plates here. These are part of the body of the radio. So because I have tested also the H3 when it arrived a long time ago, and usually in those radios, those screws back here, like in the Baofeng radios, are connected to the body of the radio and provide a point that we can add a counterpoise, a rat tail, so we can balance the antenna and make the transmission a bit better and achieve maybe a little bit longer distances. But in the H3 radio this wasn't the case. Those screws weren't connected to the body of the radio, but this happens in the H8. So let me show you what I mean. Here I have a multimeter, and okay, this is the continuity test, as most of you might know. This is the H3, okay, and if I touch here one of the screws and the antenna ground, nothing happens. So there is no point adding a counterpoise here in the H3. But this is the case with the H8, and it might be useful to some of you. You can counteract some interferences of the radio and provide better grounding by adding a counterpoise here. Let's check. Touching one of the screws and the ground of the antenna, as you can see, the continuity test works. So we can add the counterpoise here, and also this is the case with those 2 points below the battery. There's no point using those, of course, for grounding, but you know, it might help with grounding with your body. This is what happens to handheld radios. Our body acts as a ground when we touch them and completes the antenna. So this is also another interesting thing with this radio, which I find it useful because sometimes I add counterpoise to my radios, and I couldn't do this in the H3, but it can be done in the H8. Now we can proceed with the power test. Okay guys, I'm taking a break outside. I have the TID Radio H8 here just to make a quick power test so we can see how this baby performs. And here I have a frequency of 439 700 MHz at UHF. Okay, and let's see the power output. 9.7. That's wonderful. I mean, yes, as I was expecting, H8 is a workhorse. Now let's check in VHF how it performs. That's one of the repeaters that are around here in VHF. As you can see, it's at 145 something megahertz, and let's see the power here. 10.1, 10 watts. Right, so this is in ham mode. The radio is put in ham mode. I know that in GMRS it gives half of those values in watts. This is made in the firmware, so in GMRS it outputs half of those watts because this is how it is legal to transmit in GMRS mode. But in ham mode it outputs exactly as it should at 10 watts, 9 point something in UHF and 10 in VHF. This is the power test of the H8. Okay, I'm back. Now, I have connected the radio, the H8 to my laptop, and we're gonna see how it works with the programming of this radio with the CPS of the company, and of course, since it's available with Chirp. Now, before I proceed, I'd just like to show something about the firmware. I don't have my second cable here, so with the cable that I have, I wasn't able to do a demonstration of how it's upgraded, but my radio is already in the latest version, so there's no need for that. I just wanted to show it for the video. Unfortunately, I don't have my second cable with me, and the one that I have doesn't seem to work for the firmware only. It's kind of strange, this radio, on how to upgrade your firmware. There has to be a very good connection between the cable and the radio for it to work. And this one I have right now with me doesn't seem to work, but it works for programming, which is another strange thing. But anyway, so before I proceed, I just wanted to show the firmware versions that you can find in TID Radio site, because I also saw some questions and talks about it on various forums, on Facebook groups and stuff, for the different versions of this firmware. Since this radio has 3 downloads in the TID Radio site, the GMRS version, the ham version and the unlocked version, but I have downloaded all of them here. As you can see, there are 3 files, and if I select them and put them here in a hash calculator, you will see that they are exactly the same file. There is no difference between them. So I don't know what else different TID Radio has in those zip files, but the bin files of the firmware are exactly the same. You just flash it to your radio, and then you select from the boot menu trick which one you want to use. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's have a look in the CPS that the company provides. Let me connect my external camera here so you can see the radio itself. Okay, here we are, and we select COM port as always and go to read. Finished, closed. Okay, I have already, as usual, passed some frequencies inside. These are the PMR and GMRS frequencies, just for the testing of this video. Nothing special to see here. All the options are pretty known, no big differences, no strange things to write. Let's see a bit about the machine itself and the features that you can change. Here, as you can see, as I said before, the H8 has locked frequencies 136 to 174 MHz and 400 to 520 for the UHF. Unfortunately, can't receive airband. Okay, let me rephrase that. Unfortunately, it can't receive airband officially, but there is a way to change those frequencies and put them a bit lower, maybe 118 for instance, in the beginning of the VHF, but I decided not to show this in this video. Normally I would. Anything that has to do with unlocking, hacking and tinkering with our radios, I try to show it. It's not a big deal to show how it's done. There is a very easy way by changing a file, and there is another way by going here and providing a password, and it will let you change those frequencies here. I decided not to show how it's done in this video, and the reason is that it has very little practical use. The chip in this radio is not the same as the H3. It can't receive AM frequencies, and the reception is pretty bad. I tested it. I put a frequency, as I do in all my videos, of Volmet Athens, an airband frequency, which is at 127.8 megahertz, and it's a steady beacon of information. It always transmits, but the reception was pretty bad, even with my external antenna. So I see no point to change to, let's say, hack this radio to receive frequencies that it can't. Also, even if you open those frequencies, there is no way to pass them to the radio with any programming software, not by the CPS and not by Chirp. They don't accept them. So you have to do all the programming in the radio with the keypad, which is not terrible for a few frequencies, I guess, if you just want to put the airband frequencies in, but it really doesn't have any practical purpose. If anyone wants to know how it's done, ask me in the comments. I can provide some information, but you will do this at your own risk. I have to say that. Okay, let's see the options here provided. As always, everything that's in the menu is here. As you can see, the boot type, if you want to display a message, or the TID Radio logo. Now, I have to say that this CPS is not updated by TID Radio, unfortunately, and it doesn't have all the latest options that are in the menu of the radio. For example, the battery save option 1 to 8 is not existent here. You can go up to 1 to 4, and you have to change this in the menu of the radio. As I said in the beginning, this radio has also programmable buttons on the side and on the top. Over here, the orange button and the two buttons down here, down of the PTT, can be programmed with short programming and long programming, and you can change those options here. We're going to see that again in Chirp. And that's about it for the CPS of the company. As I usually do, I would definitely suggest when you receive your radio to open TID Radio CPS first and take a backup of whatever is inside of your radio. Store it somewhere just to have a backup of it, and also do the same for the first time that you will open it with Chirp. Let's go to Chirp and see how it works. Okay, go download from radio. COM port is selected, TDH8. Right, so again we have our PMR and GMRS channels. The settings again here as they are in the CPS. In the last few days I noticed that there is a new driver developed for Chirp that will support all the latest options of the newest firmware. This one that is included in Chirp again goes up, for instance, to 1 to 4 battery save, but the newest one goes up to 1 to 8, as it should. And down here we have the programmable buttons on the side of the radio. Short press and long press. There are two buttons under the PTT and one on the top of the radio, the orange one. As you can see here, I have set some options just to test them out. It has a pretty strong LED flashlight, just so you know, sometimes it's useful. And here I have set the long press of the top button in the alarm mode. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, here we have AB channel for the VFO, options for the VFO frequencies. We can select the A band and the B band work mode. Let's put the frequency here. Okay, there's no offset. FM channels, of course, for FM radio. DTMF options in case you need them. And that's about it. let's upload those to the radio. Perfect. Okay, another way for programming besides Chirp and the CPS of the company, of course, with TID radios is the Oddmaster Bluetooth programming, which this radio also has available. There is a dedicated Bluetooth button here, which when you press it, it will activate the Bluetooth inside the radio. You will see the icon of Bluetooth over there on the screen. And let's see the Oddmaster software. You have to make an account in order to use it, and it will also store your settings. You have to create a profile where you will store its settings so you can recall it on the go, so you can have many profiles with different settings and upload them and change them when you're outside of your shack. First we have to connect the radio to the Bluetooth. As you can see here, it found the TDH8. We activate it and it's connected. Then we have to go here, as you can see it says TDH8, and then we have to go select model, TID radio, and the version that we have in our firmware. So right now I'm going to select the unlocked version over here and go to read. As you can see, both in the radio and in the phone, I can see the download progress. And everything is downloaded to my phone. Here are the channels. You can select all the channels here that are stored already in the radio and modify them. And the options of the menu as they are also in the CPS and Chirp. You can change them here. Click Save, make a profile. And if you want, you can write them back to the radio. And over here we have our saved profiles with the settings that we have. We can also make changes to the options here, and we can save them under a different name. So this will create another profile here, and we can have many options of stored settings in our phone to pass them wirelessly on the go. I know Oddmaster is not the first go-to program for many ham operators or radio enthusiasts, but okay, it's a third backup option to have just in case you want to change something quickly and you don't have access to a computer, or you can't do it easily from the keypad of the radio. Just keep it in mind. Just to make a parenthesis here, I know that there is a firmware out there developed by Nick Schur that changes some things in the radio, like the appearance of the S-meter, but at the moment, if you watched my previous videos also in the channel, I'm not going to show this firmware. It's not developed anymore, and I don't see the reason to change it for just some cosmetic changes. So in conclusion, I can say that the H8 is, as I said in the beginning, the bigger brother of the H3. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the H3 Neurband. It's locked in the VHF, UHF 2 70 centimeter frequencies, but it seems like a radio I can rely on. I am a licensed ham operator, and okay, I like to tinker with my radios and play with the firmware, but I always want to have with me a radio that I can rely on. As a ham operator, it has everything that I need. Okay, I would like it to have airband reception, but that's just something for me. I like to hear the airband frequencies. It's not the main operation of the radio, so I can say, okay, I can overlook that and go on. If you want to grab it, check the links in the description. and remember to use the version that is allowed in your country, GMRS or HAM. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.